Morning, everyone. Today we're joined by a special guest. We've got Alex Gray from Brooksby College. And morning, Alex.
Morning.
So, Alex, you've got a kind of interesting job title. You are specialist environmental teacher lead, but you're also heavily involved in kind of developing projects and yeah, coming up with new ideas for the college. Do you want to talk a bit more about your role?
Yeah, so my background is in environmental management. I've worked as an ecologist, I've worked in forestry, I've done habitat management, all that sort of stuff. And I also had a background in fundraising. I used to work with a charity called the Sustainable Land Trust, where we used to routinely get grants in order to do projects on the land. So I've taught here for about 8 years. Um, and I love it. I love land-based teaching. But I kind of wanted to make it a bit more challenging for myself. Um, it was a way of building in CPD within my role. A lot of the CPD you get as a teacher is things like safeguarding and first aid and this sort of basic background stuff. But in order to keep you current and fresh, you could either leave, go on sabbatical or something, and go into industry, or you could bring the industry to you, and that's what I thought I'd do. So I've created a number of projects on the farm for multiple reasons. One, we want to be an exemplar for sustainable and regenerative land management, and regenerative land management in particular is relatively new. So, how do you learn about something which is relatively new if there aren't that many examples? So, I thought, well, I'm going to have to make them myself. So, we've created over almost 30 acres of agroforestry. We've done a big river restoration project. Um, we are trialing various different techniques with pigs in woodland. We're undertaking sustainable woodland management, creating ponds and various other things. And this creates fantastic real life learning opportunities for students, which you can then build the curriculum on top. Well, you can fit the curriculum into. So I'll give you an extreme example. If you were, I don't know, you have to teach somebody how to plant a tree. If you're planting a tree for the sake of planting the tree for an assessment, it feels a bit hollow. Whereas if you're planting a tree as part of a 30-year agroforestry project that will stand the test of time, it adds so much meaning to the students'
Mm.
assessments. And also then they say, oh, look, I was part of a you know trial project in this new approach to land management, and effectively you're doing the same assessment but it's embedded within a meaningful
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, what you're saying there, like transcends across any educational setting, isn't it? Giving real world context, makes the experience, the learning opportunity so much more meaningful. So you're really fortunate in that the site is was it 850 acres?
Yeah, we're fortunate. Agricultural colleges typically have land. Well, they always have some land attached. We're a relatively big one. There are bigger ones, but we're quite fortunate in that we've got not only quite a large farm, but a fairly diverse one. So we're a mixed farm. We've got arable, we've got livestock, we've got some woodlands, we've got some wetlands, we've got rivers, and habitat areas. So I've got a diversity of land types to work with.
Mm. And what kinds of qualifications are people doing at the college?
Currently, we're focusing on level two and level three. Well, actually, we do some level one provision as well for land based. So we've got this is typically your 16 to 18-year olds, considered to be an alternative to A levels, more of a vocational focus. Although in recently I've run degree courses, there we do have an HE provision here. At the moment, it's mainly in the animal care side of things, but there are plans for me to do another degree course again. But the vocational stuff is really important, and I think people, in especially in the context of AI,
Mm.
things like white collar work will be in less demand than the hands-on blue and green collar work
Mm.
that humans are very good at doing, and also humans really benefit from doing meaningful projects in the environment. It's a very good for you as a human animal, and it's also quite hard for robots to do.
Mm. Yeah. So I guess what's your kind of reflections on people's attitudes towards agriculture and kind of land management at the moment, and particularly with the lens of maybe the advice and the thinking of young people? Because I'm going to leave it to you what you sort of think the picture is at the
Well,
moment.
this is a very exciting time for land management, and I like to call it land management rather than farming or forestry. So historically, and still currently, unfortunately, the different sub disciplines of land management have been very siloed: farming, forestry, conservation, horticulture. And they're all separate industries with different types of people who are interested in different types of things. But that's not how the biosphere works. We live on a living planet. We are organisms, and we have to manage other organisms in order to get our food and our fiber and our timber and what have you. So nowadays, the world is hopefully moving towards a more holistic land management, where we're managing land for multiple things at once. So things like agroforestry, an example of forestry and food. It could be rewilding, whereas it's a focus on biodiversity and a bit of forestry and a bit of food, if you look at the Napa State example. So these sort of multifunctional land uses is what we're looking at. As a career, a lot of people, you know, farming is a primary industry, and our economy is a tertiary service economy, things like that. And people think, well, do I really want to be doing basic sort of, resource extraction? I went and did a degree. I should be doing sort of high level, sort of giving advice and what have you.
Mm.
But this is what's so cool about land management at the moment. We're kind of going into new territory where we really need our best and brightest to come up with really good practical solutions, and to our land use problem in order to tackle the incredibly challenging mix of climate change, biodiversity loss, soil degradation, societal disaggregation. So it's a really exciting career. And if you are, if you're a bright academic person, please come into the land management, environmental, agricultural industries, because it really needs you.
Um, can we just focus a little bit on your background as well, like how you got into this in your story? Was there a sort of has this always been part of you as a person, or was there a moment where you sort of got more interested in this?
Yes. Well, I'm a bit of an oddball, really. Well, I've been lucky enough to grow up in the outdoors, in the countryside. So a lot of my time was spent fishing and rummaging about in rivers and things like that. And I'd always studied geography and environmental type things. But the real clincher for me is I went on a sort of an expedition in New Zealand when I was 21
Mm.
with my mates, and we went into the sort of into the wilderness, sort of surviving and things like that. We did that for weeks and weeks. But the thing I noticed was how subtly degraded the environment was because of invasive species. So they've got a massive invasive species problem in New Zealand. They introduced possums, pigs, rabbits, goats, stoats were a massive problem. And the real clincher for me is I went into the middle of a very wild place called Fiordland in the rainforest there, temperate rainforest. And
Mm.
I turned over a rotten log and I thought there's going to be some interesting creatures under here. And there was nothing,
Okay.
not
Yeah.
nothing at all. And it was because of a lot of the insects and the native species have been completely devastated, but rats and things like that. And then I thought, well, blimey, the environment has been quite degraded. And I walking around the Natural History Museum in New Zealand, I thought this is quite serious. And I'd already known this stuff, but that was the thing. And I thought I really want to do something environmental. So I went into teacher training. My first time I went to teacher training as a geography teacher. I'd
Okay.
come out of the wilderness of New Zealand into a pretty rough school, which was a bit of a shock to the system. And I thought, I don't want to work in the mainstream teaching at all. And I left. I went off and became an ecologist, doing all this sort of thing. And then I just found myself being quite good at teaching people. So I went back into education in a land-based college here actually, did my PGCE, saw it through, and and that's worked really well. So this applied practical use of my theoretical knowledge has been what I found really rewarding.
I guess it's just going back also to what you were saying about the situation you're in with the college and the courses and the kind of exploring regenerative farming and sustainability. I guess how does that fit with kind of government initiatives and government focuses? Because it feels like colleges and particularly colleges that focus on the farming and land management have not had the easiest sort of ride, and a lot of them have gone under, and particularly people in your position, it's a struggle. So I wonder, kind of, actually, is there a positive spin to all of that? Is there going to be a shift in government focus, or
Well, there should be for the multi-layered reasons which I'll now give you. First of all, what we need is training in holistic land management, multifunctional land use. Agricultural colleges are beautifully placed to deliver this because we have all the different subdisciplines of land management here. Also, in the context of AI, as I've said,
mm,
going to university and being able to write a nice essay is suddenly and quite bizarrely no longer a
mm,
relevant skill in many ways because it can just be done in an instant. Um, Whereas, having the ability, so my learners, when they finish, can go into an environment, look at the species that are present there, read the land so they can go, the following species are present, which means the soil is this type, or there's a bit of a eutrophication problem in that river, or I can solve this by planting a riparian buffer, or the following invasive species are here. We could take this approach to try and solve that real world problem using some, these things called human hands, which
yeah,
are quite advanced technology.
mm,
And so it's we've got a real opportunity in land-based colleges to deliver. It's not to say that higher education isn't useful. It's still really useful. But one of the biggest bits of feedback I get from employers is they get lots of graduates who haven't got any practical skills
yeah,
or any ability to apply what they've learned. And I think what we should be doing as humans, and it is as humans, I'm trying to sort of sell the fact that what the human body can do is
yeah,
quite
mm,
impressive on the ground. Being able to go into an environment and apply theoretical knowledge, sort of a higher education standard of knowledge, on the ground using practical skills
mm,
is what sets us apart from the likes of ChatGPT and what have you.
yeah,
And it also happens to be really good for you in terms of body and mind,
mm,
and it's much needed. So
mm,
I think land-based colleges should be a real opportunity both for universities to improve their students' practical skill, but also for anybody wishing to do a bit of a career change. Maybe things like you were working in a call center or somewhere where your job is now being taken over by AI agents and you want to retrain. This could be an
mm.
opportunity. That being said, there is currently a bit of misalignment. It's all being realigned at the moment, but the courses on offer need to reflect the policies of DEFRA. So if DEFRA wants us to do multifunctional land use, something called the land sharing model, then we need to be teaching the sorts of courses that align with that
Mhm.
and not courses that are siloed into subdisciplines.
Okay, so just in kind of finishing up, if you were going to give a teacher or someone in a school who has the opportunity to engage with young people and give them a steer in their career and direction, they might come across a young person who has some interest in this. What kind of advice might you give a teacher to then pass on? What kinds of things should young people, could they do to sort of start exploring this a bit more?
Um, there's lots of things. I mean, I don't want to keep banging on about AI, but the idea, I've been quite fortunate. I was fairly non-committal with deciding what I wanted to do as a career. So I thought, I'm going to do geography which is general.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do both human and physical geography because they're even more general. And then I'm going to do general environmental management masters. So it was really broad. That served me quite well because
Mm.
it means I'm a generalist and I can adapt. And the world is changing so quickly with things like AI, encouraging people not to worry about a specific career and just think about your general skills.
Yeah.
It would be the way forward. I'd also, at an early age, emphasize the importance of practical work experience. Everybody, especially people in my batch of university who left in 2008 when the economy collapsed and everyone was scrabbling around for jobs. And then everyone said, well, have you got any experience? No. Well, come back when you got some experience. And everyone was like, I can't get any experience
Yeah.
until you give me a job.
Yeah.
So, and that's really frightening when you're older and you've got to get you've got to live, you've got to rent a house and this, that, and the other, all these pressures. While you're young and still living at home with your parents, hopefully, then you can afford to go out and get work experience. And I
Mm.
would strongly urge you to do that as young at age as possible. That's what I would strongly recommend, especially things like ecology. Join things like bat conservation groups, amphibian and reptile conservation groups. Go out and volunteer, use your time, go out and do surveys while you can afford to do it. And you might leave with a protected species license from a very early age. It was a useful thing to have.
Well, that's some really good advice. Yeah, I think something that we, generally through the Ministry of Eco-Education is just trying to encourage schools to engage in more hands-on kind of activities with their environment and to sort of explore. And I think that kind of also links with this as well, that sense of trying to engage young people as early as possible in yeah, the natural environment around them and to become more accustomed and comfortable in that sort of setting. But I love the idea also of just encouraging young people to engage with yeah, wildlife trusts or whoever it might be in their local area.
Yeah.
Is there anything exciting that you've got on the horizon at the moment, Alex? Are you doing any kind of great
Yeah.
projects or
Yeah.
anything?
So I mean, I can't give too much away. Some of it's a bit secretive, but
Okay.
I'm working with somebody so there is an emerging market in forest medicines. So there's certain genuine pharmaceuticals that
Mm.
can come out of plants that can be grown in the UK, and also general sort of health additives and supplements. So I'm going to be growing some of these plant species within an agroforestry system in a way of securing additional income. That's going to be interesting. I'm also going to be monitoring the biodiversity of our existing agroforestry scheme. So we are doing pitfall traps to monitor invertebrate numbers, things like that. Also doing a trial of feeding pigs. We've got pigs in our woodlands, feeding them different species of fruit. So blackthorn, hawthorn, apples of different kinds,
Mm.
different types of plums, to see how effectively the pigs can be used to germinate these plants.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's another interesting one. But there is another point I would definitely recommend for schools who are interested in pushing this sort of engagement with the land. Lots of schools aren't fortunate enough to have lots of land.
Mm.
A lot of them are landlocked in the middle of a town or
Yeah.
city.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would encourage them, if they can, to engage with their local land-based college, wherever it is, because they are specialists and have all the facilities. There may be a way of partnering up. If that's not available, maybe try contacting a local farm. Lots of farms, especially if they're part of higher tier stewardship, actually have funding to support educational visits. That might also help you.
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you for that piece of advice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for sharing everything.
No problem.